Hello everyone, welcome to Bible Corner Reviews, where I amuse myself making videos on Bibles that I find interesting, usually. In this case, I am very excited to show you guys this Bible from Thomas Nelson. It is the newly released New King James single column verse-by-verse reference Bible. And a lot of people I know have been looking forward to this release, and so the main question I'm going to kind of answer in this video, or at least hope to answer, is does it meet your expectations for what it was going to be? So let's get into it. We're going to be looking at the brown genuine leather and the brown leather soft. So the leather soft comes in a single piece slipcase, pretty simple. And then the genuine leather comes in a single piece clamshell that flips open. So here's the information on the front and a bit of the information on the back. And this one does retail for $129.99. Obviously, that's not the price you'll get it for. The genuine leather you'll find for around $85 to $90, depending on the location, and obviously if it's on sale, cheaper. And the leather soft for around $45. So it is in the mid-range, but very still affordable option. So let's take a look at the covers on these. The leather soft is one of the more smooth, shiny editions. Now, if you've watched any videos on Thomas Nelson leather soft, they're kind of all over the place, not in a bad way, but they're not always the same. And this is a more shiny option. It's still very nice. It's got a kind of a marbled look to it, and it's a little more red than brown, just to point that out. There's Holy Bible stamped on the front. The spine has Holy Bible and the New King James logo with the Thomas Nelson logo. And there's 5 tooled hub indications is what I usually call them, where the hubs would be. And then those are gold stamped on the outside of that. And this does have the ISBN on the back. There's perimeter stitching. And there are 2 double satin 3/8" ribbons. And probably what you've noticed as I've turned this around, it has goffered page edges. And this is something that Thomas Nelson has been doing quite often in more recent publications. The McLaren large print thin line reference that they did had the goffered page edges. The Timeless Truths that I reviewed had it as well. And there were several last year that I never got to review that had this design, or not this design, but a goffered design. So it's becoming more popular. And this one honestly is not one I don't think everyone's going to like. It's a little bit busy. You can kind of see here, it's like it comes out as a circle design, but it does get pretty busy. To me, it's almost so busy that you can ignore it, but some people are not going to find it so. So that's just something to take note of. And both the genuine leather and the leather soft have that. And there are brown head and tail bands. So that's the imitation leather soft. Now for the genuine leather. And again, this genuine leather is different than pretty much all the other genuine leathers from Thomas Nelson that I own, and I own several now. And this one's actually more of a calf skin feel. It does have more of a patina cowhide texture to it, and you can kind of see if this was not a paste down and you bent it, I think it would actually indent and make a patina line. So I think it's more of a natural grain. This has 5 raised hubs. They are very pronounced. And the gold on this is extremely bright. You can see that it's just reflecting off the camera and the lighting here. So you have Holy Bible stamped on the back, New King James Nelson logo. Same as the imitation leather, only there's no Holy Bible on the front. And unfortunately, they have the ISBN on the back as well. So those are the 2 covers of these 2 Bibles. Now the interiors are pretty much exactly the same, and they do lay about the same when you open them in terms of the lay flat capabilities. So I'm going to be focusing on the genuine leather just for kicks in this video. So we'll put that guy out of the frame here. The dimensions of this Bible are actually much smaller than I was anticipating, which is one of the things I was surprised to see after opening the box. And the trim size is an 8.5 by 5 1/4. So it's the personal size layout, and it's 1 3/4 inches thick. So it's a little chunky, but not as thick as the single column reference from Thomas Nelson. So it's a very mid-sized Bible. Opening this up, we have a brown liner. It's kind of a synthetic. There's reinforcement tape. After having taken apart a couple Bibles myself for rebinding purposes, I have a better understanding for actually noticing that and knowing what I'm talking about when I say it's there. So it does have some. Holy Bible, and there's a single end sheet, and then one piece of semi-gloss cardstock paper, then Bible paper. So you have the same page basically twice. Here's the publication page. Now this does say 2023, and that is because it was a 2024 release in terms of when it came to stores, but as far as the typesetting and the layout and construction of this Bible, it was a 2023 publication. So you'll see that down here as well. This is printed in China, but the typesetting is by 2K Denmark. So you have table of contents, preface, and I've mentioned this before, I think, but when I go through prefaces, I always notice usually that they're single column, and I am personally a very strong proponent of single column Bibles, and oftentimes I'll be thinking to myself, I wish the preface just continued throughout the entire Bible and the whole Bible was that design. Well, in this case, it's actually true, because look at this. Genesis 1 in our layout here is what you've probably been anticipating, and that is a single column, verse by verse, with columns in the gutter or in the inner column, and a lot of people will refer to that as the ICR, inner column reference. So that is the overall page design. The text is a 9-point New King James comfort print. I really love the New King James comfort print. It's a very nice text. And you can see a little bit of ghosting here. That's one of the complaints that I would have, is I'm not sure the GSM on this paper. Usually Thomas Nelson has a 36 GSM for their mainline Bibles, but this doesn't quite feel like their usual 36 GSM. So I don't know if it's a little bit less or just the opacity of this paper is not as good as normal, but it is line matched, so that does adjust some of that. So it's not as bad as it could be, but definitely not the best paper in the world, which is unfortunate, but that might be fixed in the future. So let's get to a more central location here where it will hold open. Now this Bible will lay flat very well after some use. Even in Genesis 1 it wants to, but it will take a little bit of using. So the overall design is very conducive for study. Now the cross-references are always at the bottom section of the inner column. They are not spaced in the middle, and with the comparisons that I'll do later, I'll point that out with one of the other Nelson inner column references. I kind of wish that these were spaced evenly throughout the page, and that will just make it a little bit easier to use. And this is a reference Bible, so that's one thing I think could be improved in the future, but for now I am very pleased to see them in the gutter, and that pushes the text right to the center of the page, so you never have to worry about the text getting swallowed up in the gutter, which is a complaint from the single column reference that Thomas Nelson has done already. So as was typical with this layout, the paragraphs are indicated by bolded verse numbers, and these verse numbers are inset. So this is very similar to the ESV verse by verse preaching Bible, which has the single column verse by verse and the verses are just inset instead of on the outside. I kind of like this design. It does make it easy to see the verses, but then also keeps that text looking very plain. The poetic settings are your typical poetic format, even for a single column. So it does change a little bit, but it is something you'll be familiar with. And something, just a little detail feature that I noticed was there's a little square at the upper, in between the page number and the book reference. I guess it's just a layout detail that they decided to add. I'm not sure. I noticed it, but it's not like it really applies anywhere else in the Bible. This is a single tone color, so there's no red accents, which I think is a little bit unfortunate. This is something that's obviously not all Bibles have, but Thomas Nelson does it in a lot of their editions where they'll have red accents, and the cross references will be red and the verse numbers. So that is a helpful thing that I think in a future edition might be beneficial, but this is a great start, and not all people like that, so I can understand why it wasn't necessarily a first order detail. Another thing is this has the 72,000 cross-reference system, so it is the full, as far as I know, it's the full New King James cross-reference system. I honestly don't know how many they normally have, and I actually don't know the distinction between how many cross-references and how many textual footnotes. I know there's probably a number out there, but I don't know that number. And the textual footnotes are intermingled with the cross-references, so they're all spaced in there. Books always begin on a new page, and the words of Christ in this edition are in red, and that's also the case with the Leathersoft edition. And I will be very honest, I am usually a very strong critic of red letter because I am very attuned to the variance in the red letters, at least to my eyes, and this one is very consistent in both editions, so really happy to see that. There's obviously a little bit of difference between some pages, but in this edition it's been more between an individual line in a page. So it's not the entire page that's darker, it'll be one line or one section of words. So it's not very noticeable whatsoever. At the end of Revelation is a concordance index. So this is a layout that I really appreciate and have come to love from the Lockman New American Standards that I've reviewed that have had it. And they've been really some of the first ones that I noticed it in. And it's just more of a robust concordance. And in a reference Bible, I really like that. It adds a little bit more to your average concordance experience. So it has Greek words and I believe Hebrew words that are highlighted. So it gives a little bit of that in here as well. And I believe it links to Strong's Concordance, looks like. So they do a really good job with that, and it gives a little bit more meat to the concordance compared to, say, something like the average ESV concordance, which is just the references. So really like that, especially in a small verse by verse reference edition like this. At the end of the concordance, you have your note regarding the type, and then the 8 Thomas Nelson maps, and the end sheet. The first comparison I wanted to do was the New King James single column wide margin reference from Thomas Nelson. This one came out a couple years ago now, or at least this edition did. This design has been in print as, I believe it was the Journaling Bible at one point, but it was released as the wide margin. And this one is also an ICR, but you can see that the references were centered, and it does have the red text accents. So we'll open that up here so you can see that. So it was a little bit different, but the same idea. And I believe this is a 9-point text as well, but it had the wide margins and it was not verse by verse. So in terms of size, this is more what I was expecting in my mind when I heard single column verse by verse reference. So this was more of a compact edition than I was expecting. So this was probably the first ICR that the New King James came out with, and at least for Thomas Nelson. And so that was one that a lot of people, I think, didn't notice and didn't really recognize. And I think this one was really overlooked. Up next, I think, is the biggest competitor to this Bible, not because it's a verse by verse, but because really this one has a lot of the things that this one has, only reversed. And if you know what I'm talking about, that is the single column reference Bible in the New King James from Thomas Nelson. This one is quite popular, and both of my reviews of this Bible have been very well received, and not without warrant to my eyes. This one particularly is a very nice edition that I highly recommend. I will link the video in the description. But this one has the references in the outside column, and so the text goes into the gutter, whereas in the single column verse by verse in the ICR, let's get to a text layout like this, it's the exact opposite. The references are in the center and the text is on the outside. So it fixes the problem that the single column reference had, where in texts that are more central in the Bible, you have the page kind of getting swallowed up in the gutter and the text kind of disappearing there, which makes it hard to read because sometimes you have to actually move the Bible just a little bit, but that little bit does affect your reading experience. And everyone that I have talked to that has a complaint about this Bible, that is the complaint, including my own. That's not the case with the ICR. The text is in the center of the page, and the references are here if you want them, but at the same time, you can just have a pleasant reading experience and not have to worry about even tipping that Bible at all to be able to see the paper. Now, the one thing that the single column reference did that I wish the ICR had done was the red accents, but as a two-tone color, it's not bad. The last comparison is a mouthful. It is the KJV personal sized large print single column reference Bible, and this one is also in the genuine leather. I have not reviewed this one yet, but I will soon. This is one I picked up right before Christmas that I bought myself. So this is the KJV, and it is an end of verse reference Bible, a very nice design, but it's very close in terms of the text layout in that it's a verse by verse. Now you'll notice what I mentioned earlier about these verses being inset. These ones are on the edge. So that's the comparison that I was thinking of in my head when I said that. This one is again a single color page design. There's no red accents, and the cross references are at the end of the verses instead of in a column at any point. Now, a nice thing about this one is the textual footnotes are separated at the bottom of the page, so those are easy to distinguish. But the overall layout is a little bit different, and I believe this is a 10-point King James text size, where this is a 9-point New King James. But overall, the footprint of these two Bibles is very similar, and they do have a verse-by-verse single-column layout. Okay, I just had to throw this in. Look at these different leathers. These are all genuine leathers from Thomas Nelson, and they are all completely different. I think this is kind of cool. Obviously, these are a King James and a New King James, but these are both New King James, and they're just completely different leathers. So it's really cool to see just the variations that you get from even one publisher, and it makes it kind of interesting because different editions have different features and the different types of leather that they have on them. And I think that's just really cool. It kind of gives a little bit of spice and variety to the options out there. Well, there you have it. That is the single column verse by verse reference Bible from Thomas Nelson in the New King James. My question is, did it meet your expectations? Was it what you were expecting to see in this Bible? For me, I did have a couple things. One was the size. I thought it would be a little bit bigger just from what I had heard. And so I was pleasantly surprised to see that it was a very personal size Bible. Now, the genuine leather I'm also surprised about being very calf hide or calf skin like and very patina looking, and that was kind of cool. And the goffered page edges was something I did not expect as well. I'm not sure what the reception is going to be on that, but that is one that is definitely becoming more popular with Thomas Nelson. So let me know what you think. Was this something that was done right, or was there some things in here that you wish were done a little bit differently? To me, it hits most of the points that I had complained about in the single column reference Bible. Obviously, the paper is still a big one, but overall, I think they did a great job with this edition, and it's definitely one to take a look at, especially if you are into single column, verse by verse, inside column reference Bibles.